So today's video is on the process of digestion. So first let's have a look at what digestion is. So digestion is the process by which large food molecules are being hydrolyzed by enzymes into smaller food molecules to be absorbed in the small intestine into our bloodstream so we can get the nutrients from the food we eat. So hydrolysis, when it means hydrolyzed by enzymes, is the breakdown of a molecule due to the addition of water. And you can see here we have a disaccharide being broken down into its monosaccharides. And by this addition of water, we are adding this water across this glycosidic bond to split this disaccharide up into its monosaccharides, breaking down this large molecule into smaller molecules. So the alimentary canal is a key word that we'll have to know to understand the process of digestion. And this is the passage that food actually passes through. So this would be the mouth, in the stomach, the small intestine. So it's where the food actually travels. In comparison to accessory organs, which are just organs in the digestive system that the food doesn't actually pass through, but it provides enzymes or other substances to aid the digestion in the alimentary canal. So these accessory organs don't actually hold the food never passes through them, but they aid with the digestion in the alimentary canal. So we also have to understand the difference between physical and chemical digestion. So first we'll look at physical. And physical digestion is the breaking down of large food particles into smaller pieces to increase the surface area of the food particles for ingestion. So increasing the surface area means that more enzymes will be able to act on each piece of food at a given time. So it will be a faster rate of digestion. And the chemical composition isn't actually changed during this physical digestion. And this is because we're just breaking down the large pieces into smaller pieces, but we're not actually taking away chemicals, changing this composition of the compound of food. And physical digestion can be done while chewing by the teeth. We're breaking down the food in our mouths into smaller pieces. It can be done by the churning in the stomach. And it can also be done by emulsifying fats with bile. And bile emulsifying fats means it's breaking down these lipid molecules into smaller lipid globules, these droplets of fats that have a larger surface area to be acted on by the enzymes. And in comparison, chemical digestion is hydrolysis. So hydrolysis via enzymes, so enzymes aiding this hydrolysis of large insoluble molecules into smaller soluble molecules to be absorbed. So this means that these large food molecules that are insoluble wouldn't be able to be absorbed into the bloodstream by themselves are being hydrolyzed into these smaller soluble molecules so they can be absorbed into the bloodstream. And one of the main differences is that this changes the chemical composition, unlike physical that doesn't change the chemical composition. So we're actually breaking down molecules in this chemical digestion. We're breaking it down into smaller parts that doesn't have the same chemical composition as the large insoluble molecules beforehand. So now we can start looking at the actual process of this digestion. So the first stage of digestion is when the food enters into our oral cavity. And oral cavity means our mouth hole, basically. So oral meaning mouth, cavity meaning hole. And the salivary glands produce saliva containing salivary amylase. So you can see in this diagram we have our salivary glands, and these producing this saliva containing enzymes mixes with the food we're chewing. And when we're chewing, we're breaking down this food with physical digestion, aided by the enzymes in the saliva, which is chemical digestion. And this salivary amylase that is in the saliva starts to break down any starch into maltose. And this is the polysaccharide into its disaccharide form. And so next, when the chewed food is done in the mouth, we swallow it. And this is carried down the esophagus. And this is the esophagus here. And this esophagus carries food from our mouth to the stomach. So our mouth, you can imagine, is somewhere up here, and this esophagus carries the food down to our stomach here. And so our stomach, as a general definition, is the muscular sac with an inner lining or layer that produces enzymes. So this organ is still part of our alimentary canal because it holds the actual food at one stage in the digestive system. And so we know that the stomach is an acidic environment as it contains HCl, hydrochloric acid. So the amylase from our saliva is denatured because it's in the wrong pH and it breaks the bonds in these amylase enzyme proteins. So the digestion of starch into maltose stops. But pepsin is produced in the stomach. So this starts digesting proteins down into polypeptides. So even though we stop the digestion of carbohydrates, we start up the digestion of these proteins with the pepsin produced by the stomach. And so next, we move out of the alimentary canal. For this slide, we're moving out of where the food is produced and we're going to be looking at the accessory organs. So the extra stuff, extra enzymes produced by other organs that the food doesn't actually pass through. So first we look at the liver, and this produces bile to emulsify our fats. And so we know, as I said before, that bile breaks down these lipid molecules into smaller droplets to have a larger surface area to be acted on by enzymes. And this bile is stored in the gallbladder until it's needed in our digestion process. So if you see here, this is our liver, this is where the bile is produced, and our gallbladder down here contains this bile until we need it. And so at the same time, our pancreas is secreting pancreatic juices. So our pancreas behind our stomach here. And these pancreatic juices contain enzymes. And these enzymes include pancreatic amylase. So this is to continue the process of digestion of starch into maltose if it did not completely finish in our mouth with the salivary amylase. It contains trypsin, which continues the digestion of proteins from polypeptides into peptides or dipeptides. Aminopeptidases, which also aid in the digestion of proteins, and lipase, which acts on the fats that we've emulsified with our bile. And now we're moving back into the alimentary canal, so where the food is actually passing through. And so the food moves from our stomach, where we left it, in the acidic environment, into our duodenum. And the duodenum is just the top of the small intestine. And this is where the food mixes with our pancreatic juices. So our pancreas, we can imagine, is behind the stomach here, feeds its pancreatic juices into the duodenum in the small intestine. At the same time, our food passes into the duodenum. So these pancreatic juices contain amylase, trypsin, aminopeptidases, and lipase, as we said before. And this pancreatic juices also contain alkaline salts. And this is because we need to neutralize the stomach acid that we have passed our food through, because the enzymes in our pancreatic juices don't work well in an acidic environment. So we need to neutralize these. And so moving on, our food passes from the duodenum at the top of our small intestine into the jejunum. And this is the middle of the small intestine where the food moves through. And the muscles in our small intestine push our food through the ileum, and this is the bottom of our small intestine. And this is where our food is mixed with membrane-bound enzymes. And these membrane-bound enzymes are enzymes attached to the lining of the ileum, where the food molecules pass through and are hydrolyzed on the lining of the intestine. And these membrane-bound enzymes contain, they are maltose, lactase, and sucrase. And as we know, these will digest our maltose, lactose, and sucrose, are disaccharides. And to finish, we know that our molecules are then absorbed into the bloodstream via the ileum. So the ileum, as we said, is the bottom of the small intestine. So these molecules are absorbed via the ileum, via the epithelial cells on the villi in the ileum into our bloodstream. But what happens to the leftover material? Well, the leftover material that isn't absorbed into the bloodstream moves into the large intestine. So this is this massive organ here. And the large intestine absorbs all the remaining water from the leftover material that hasn't been absorbed. And the resulting material left over from the large intestine, when all the water has been absorbed, is stored as feces in our rectum. So this is down here. And this is then removed in the process of egestion or defecation.